Imagine you are the Minister of Finance in Ghana. You are in charge of the entire money. You host the Vice President of the United States of America in your house, fed him food. And then you travel to the US for a business meeting. You go to a roadside restaurant to buy some orange juice. You order 2 glasses of orange juice, one for yourself and one for your secretary. And you realize that instead of giving you the orange juice in the glass like you ordered, they put it in the takeaway container and then serve it to you and tell you that in this restaurant, black people are not allowed to eat in the restaurant. So they will take your money, but you cannot sit in the restaurant to eat. That was what Gbedemah was faced with when he visited the US in 1957 as a sitting finance minister of Ghana. What happened after that situation? That is the point of this video. My name is Enebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer based in the US. And this month, I've shared some little known stories about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah on this platform. And today, I'm going to climax my Nkrumah trilogy with a story about how the Akosombo Dam came to be built. It started with a dark arc and then ended at what it ended. The whole Ghana have light now. So let's go into it. So you are wondering who is Gbedemah? Komla Gbedemah. He was the finance minister of Ghana from 1954 to 1961. But even before he was a finance minister, he started out as a member of the UGCC, the United Gold Coast Convention, which was the political party that brought Kwame Nkrumah from London to come and be part of them. And Bedma himself was actually a rich businessman himself, and also he was a teacher. But when he met Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he and Nkrumah quickly became friends. And we all know about the Big Six, right? The Big Six were 6 leaders of the UGCC who was arrested in 1948 because, according to the British, they were organizing the Accra route in 1948. So, a little bit background. So, on February 20, I think was it 28? On February 28, 1948, Ghanaians who fought with the British in World War II were promised pension, and the British refused to pay them their pension. And so they marched to the castle, which was the seat of government, to request that their pension be paid, because being paid pension was part of the reason why they fought in World War II in a war they did not personally believe in. And so the British police commander commanded the military and police in the castle to open fire on the protesters, killing 3 World War II veterans, Sergeant Ajete, Corporal Atipo. I keep forgetting the third guy's name. And so when these people were killed, it angered the people of Ghana, and the king of Accra at the time, Ne Kwabena Boni, was it? Yeah, I think that was his name, organized a protest and riot in Accra, and British businesses were boycotted. British businesses were being burnt down. It was a riot, Accra riot of 1948. And the British thought that the people of Ghana just listened to one person. So they thought that it was the UGCC, the political party, that organized the riot. So they arrested the leaders of the UGCC. Of course, the leaders of the UGCC partook in the riot, but they did not organize it. It was the people of Ghana, the masses, who rose up to fight this injustice. And they were arrested, jailed. We now know them as the Big Six. And Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, after this arrest, wanted to keep going harder at the British. Kwame Nkrumah saw the arrest as an opportunity to ask for independence immediately. That is the reason why he came out with the slogan self-governance now. And the leaders of the UGCC, maybe because they were older than Kwame Nkrumah, thought that we need to take our time. These people just put us in jail. We can't antagonize them further. And so Kwame Nkrumah left the UGCC and formed his own political party, CPP. And the CPP became popular among the youth and the masses of Ghana because the event of 1948 was still fresh on the memories of Ghanaians. And so Kwame Nkrumah's advocacy really resonated with Ghanaians. And the British noticed this. So what did they do? They put Kwame Nkrumah in jail. So instead of putting Kwame Nkrumah in jail in Accra, they sent him away to a jail in the north, right? And so while Kwame Nkrumah was in jail, the British purported to organize the first elections in Ghana because they thought that since Kwame Nkrumah, who is very charismatic and outspoken, is in jail, he cannot campaign to win the election. So the UGCC, who want to, take their time to fight for independence, would have won, and the British will have a bit more control. This is a play the British had run in other countries. Jamaica, for example, still to date is still sort of under British rule because the British were able to be successful in getting somebody who will play ball with them in charge of the presidency or the prime ministership. And the British plan failed because Kwame Nkrumah's CPP won the first elections in Ghana. How did they win the first election in Ghana? That is where Gbedemah comes in. Gbedemah left UGCC with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah to become a member of the CPP. Gbedemah was a rich businessman, so he was a strategist. So he was like the organizer. Kwame Nkrumah was the speaker. Gbedemah was the organizer. And usually we don't realize the importance of partnerships in Ghana. But partnerships are important. Everybody is supposed to play to their strength. Kwame Nkrumah's strength is public speaking. Gbedemah's strength is organizing people. So while Kwame Nkrumah was in jail, Gbedemah went to the youth and the rich women in Ghana. Market women in Ghana have money. And then convinced them that, what? In order for us to get Nkrumah to be out of jail and lead us, we need to win this election and win it decisively. And so Gbedemah organized the CPP as their de facto leader, even though he was not as charismatic as Nkrumah. And they won the first election. They won 34 out of 38 seats that were out for grabs. CPP won landslide across all the regions of Ghana except the Ashanti region. Actually, they also won some seats in the Ashanti region, but not all. And so this means that the plans of the British backfired, and Kwame Nkrumah was removed from jail to become the leader of government business in Ghana in 1952. In 1954, he started putting together his cabinet. Bedma became the finance minister. And so the reason why he put Bedma as finance minister was because Bedma was a strategist. He knows how to get things done. And Ghana's economy needed someone like Bedma. So as part of Bedema's job, his job included going around the world to negotiate financial deals on behalf of Ghana. So Bedma used to travel around the world to do deals with the UK, with the US, with Russia, different countries on behalf of Ghana, right? That was his job as finance minister, especially because Ghana didn't have a vice president. So he was like the de facto vice president of Ghana at that point. And so in 1957, when Ghana gained independence, the vice president of the US at the time was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was vice president before he became president. And as vice president, Richard Nixon came to Ghana to visit, to help in our independence declaration. He was in Ghana. And actually, there's a funny story about how one of the journalists who was in Ghana to cover the independence celebration was an American, African American, who happened to be standing next to Richard Nixon in Ghana. And then Richard Nixon asked him, how does it feel to be free? And the African American man told Richard Nixon that, I don't know how that feels. I'm from Alabama. This was because around this time, there was something happening in the US called Jim Crow. So Jim Crow is like a system of segregation where black people were being treated worse than white people in America. This is factual American history. And in 1954, in a case called Brown versus Board of Education, the US Supreme Court said segregation was illegal and unconstitutional, and black people needed to be treated as well as white people in America. This was in 1954, which means before Ghana gained independence. But out of 1957, when Ghana gained independence, segregation, Jim Crow, bad treatment was still happening in America. And if you study the history of America, people are going to tell you that Jim Crow laws were happening in the southern part of America. But that is not true. There were some states in the northern part of America who were also Jim Crow states. One of them happened to be a state called Delaware, which the former president of the US, President Biden, is from. And so in 1954, October 1954, Gbedemah, the vice president of Ghana, happened to be in the US to do some, business on behalf of Ghana. At this point, World Bank headquarters was in Ghana. Ghana was already doing business with World Bank. So maybe he was there to see the World Bank. And then while he was there, he went to a place called Dover in Delaware, a city in Delaware. And it happened to be a roadside restaurant. It's not like a big, important restaurant. This Nyama Nyama roadside restaurant to order for orange juice. And this restaurant is called Howard Johnson. And he went to Howard Johnson to order for orange juice. He ordered for the orange juice. He was given the orange juice in the container when he specifically said he wanted 2 glasses of orange juice because he was working with his secretary, who happens to be an African American. And so he got drink for himself and the secretary. And when he said, he was told that we can't serve you in the restaurant, you have to take it out and drink it. You have to do it take away. You can't drink in the restaurant. And he was like, what do you mean? And they said, we said no Negroes allowed. And so Bedma didn't want to make a big deal out of it because he's here for a short time. And so he told them that, I'm not even from here. I happen to be a diplomat, because if you're a government official, like a minister, you're a diplomat. I happen to be a diplomat from Ghana. This is my ID that proves that. And the restaurant server, the waitress said, I don't care who you are. You are black. You are a nigger. Niggers are not allowed to sit here. And so he paid for the drink and left. But, at this point, Bedema, because he was a student of Dr. Nkrumah, understood the power of media. Why am I bringing this up? When Ghana gained independence in 1957, the reason why the vice president of the US was in Ghana was because the US wanted Ghana to be close to the US. Because something was happening in the world at this point called Cold War. The US and the USSR, aka Russia, or the Soviet Union, were vying for supremacy in the world. The US want to be the big brother or the big daddy of the world. USSR wanted to be the big daddy of the world. And so Ghana, who happens to be the first country in Sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence, was like a leader in Africa. So if you get Ghana on your side, you have the whole Africa on your side. That's what the US was thinking. So the minister of Ghana, a minister of Ghana being treated like this in the US was not a good thing for the US. So Gbedemah went to the press and said, "This is how I was treated in the US. Very bad." And so there was an international backlash around the world. People were looking at the US with some side eye. So this was before there was internet. So people didn't know what was happening in different countries. So while segregation was happening in America, the US government was using dogs to chase black people in America. Black people were being, apart from lynching and everything, water hose was being used to uh, attack black people in America. All this was happening in America, but people outside of America they didn't know this because there was no CNN, there was no Fox News, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. So when something happens in your country, only people in your country knew. And so when the finance minister of Ghana, Gbedemah, began telling the world that, hey, in America, if you are black, you can't even buy orange juice and sit down in a restaurant and drink. It was bad news for America. And so the president of the US at the time, Eisenhower, how do you pronounce his name? Eisenhower, Hoa. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name. Eisenhower heard about this. And the first thing that happened was the Secretary of State in the US issued an apology to Ghana, and the US ambassador to Ghana, whose name was Wilson Flake. Wilson Flake said, "This is an exceptional and isolated event," which means that this is not something that happens in America. In America, we are not racist. This just so happened to be this one person who was racist. So forgive us. And he invited Gbedemah to come and meet with the president of the US, Eisenhower. And then they sat down to have breakfast. So Bedma is a businessman, he doesn't really get emotional about things. So when he was invited to meet with the president of the US, he was like, you know what, let me go meet him and then ask him what I want. At this point, Ghana was negotiating with an American company called Kaiser Aluminium with the World Bank and then with the UK because Ghana wanted to build the Akosombo Dam to generate electricity for Ghana to service our industries, right? And so when he met with the president of the US, the president apologized. The president told him that, in America, we are no racist. This is something that was a one-off. And Bedema told the president that I was really, really humiliated by this because I, Bedema, hosted your vice president, Nixon, in my house in Ghana. I fed him in Ghana. So if me, somebody who fed your vice president in Ghana, will be treated like this in the restaurant, roadside restaurant, he actually used the word roadside restaurant in America, how do you think the rest of Americans are being treated? And the president of the US was like, you know what, I'm sorry. You got me. So what do you want? And Bedema was like, you know what, to let this go away, I'm negotiating with a company in America, with the UK, and with World Bank for some money to build the Akosombo Dam to generate electricity for Ghana. So what's up? What you finna do? And Eisenhower was like, you know what? I'll do I'll see what I can do. And so I think they arrived at the deal. Bedema went to Times Magazine and told Times Magazine that I want the people of Ghana to understand that there are very few people in the US who act this way. So it's not everybody in America who is racist. There are only few people in America who are racist. So he gave a good report about the US, and in exchange, the US built the Akosombo Dam. And so if you have electricity in Ghana today, courtesy of the Akosombo Dam, it took the fact that people were mean to Gbedemah, the finance minister in Ghana. He stomached that and said, you know what, I'm not going to use this to my own personal advantage. I'm going to turn this as a positive for my entire country. and he turned it to a positive for Ghana. And today we have electricity. I'm saying this to say sometimes when misfortunes happens in your life, it may be God's way of putting you in your position to solve problems for bigger community or for the world or for your country. So whatever it is you are going through right now, remember how Gbedemah turned a negative to a positive. If you are somebody who really like intellectual conversations like this, subscribe to this channel because these are the type of conversations I like to have. Sometimes I talk about current affairs, sometimes I talk about the economy, sometimes I talk about history, but always come from a place of intellect. Subscribe and talk to you later.